We are doing Chip and Pin is really, really, really dead. We have Adam Laurie, Zach Franken, Andrea Barasani, and Daniel Bianco.
Hello, everybody. Never done a talk with so many speakers, so hopefully it won't be too messy. So I'm Andrea Barisani.
I'm Daniele. I'm Daniele Bianco.
Whoa!
I'm Daniele Bianco.
Now they really know your name.
I'm Zach Franken.
And I'm Adam Laurie.
Okay. So we're going to talk about chip and pin, and our title says that it's definitely broken. So, and also at the end there will be a bonus.
Yeah, so those of you that stick around right to the end, after questions, I've got a happy ending for you. Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. And also, if any of you have seen mine and Daniela's previous talks, we always show a video that tells you how you can apply this research to get girls. Because we think it's a very important message for the hacking community to show that, to put value to the research. Otherwise, you know, it's all technicalities, it gets boring. Instead, if you show that you can get a girl with the technique, then yes, you deliver and everyone remembers that. So.
Yeah, they tried to draft in a couple of extras. We declined.
Yeah, they declined. We don't know why. I mean, the video is so decent and dignified. Anyway, so okay. Why is doing that? I'm sorry. I just pressed the right arrow and it opened open Office for some reason. Just. Okay, so what is AMV? So when we talk about chip and pin, we talk about a technology which is called AMV, which basically it is being used for going away from magstripe on credit cards. It's a standard which has been developed by Europay, MasterCard, and Visa, and it employs the use, as I said, of smart cards on the actual credit card. So they're doing this because, as you probably know from previous talks from Adam about the magstripe can be trivially cloned. So there's no security involved. You can just skim the magstripe and clone a credit card. So one of the reasons why they want to use a chip is for improving the security of the entire system. One of the other reasons is doing offline card verification. So when a terminal verifies the card, that happens offline. There's no actual connection to the backend being involved. And that's one of the features that they want to push. And one of the other reasons is having multiple applications on one card. So we can have MasterCard cards, which also can process Maestro. And you have two completely separate applications on the same card. Or you can have VPay and Visa on the same card. Do you want to explain that video?
So yeah, one thing you should never see is this.
And if anyone wonders, the JD written on my hand stands for Jammy Dodgers.
In this example, we're going to use our JCOP card, which is emulating an EMV payment card, to make a transaction. I'm going to select the Visa application, sorry, MasterCard application, select OK, and now I'm going to enter a small transaction value.
So on that card you had both Visa and MasterCard. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you ask nicely, I'll stick Amex on there for you too.
Okay. So one of the big issues about chip and pin, and is one of the main reasons why we're actually doing this talk, is because using the chip, using a more secure technology, basically enables card issuers to shift the liability to the final consumer. And this is strictly related to the fact that now with chip and pin, you have to use a pin for processing transactions. So in most countries, they say if the pin has been used, as the pin is secured, it means that either it is the actual user doing the transaction, or that the user has been negligent into storing the PIN. And in case of fraud, the liability might shift to the user if the user is not able to prove undeniably that he didn't perform the transactions on its own. And we think that's a problem when they're trying to leverage on the security of this technology to shift the liability. And also, if we look at the fine print for some of the credit cards out there, we can see that anyway, the liability protection does not apply on, for example, ATM transactions. And ATM transactions, they are protected by the PIN in the first place. That's one of the main reasons the PIN was introduced. So as an example, this is a very recent news from June. One guy is trying to sue the CIBC bank, Canadian bank, because basically there's been a fraud case, and they say our records show that this was a chip and PIN transaction, and this means the customer personal card and personal PIN number were used in carrying out this transaction. As a result, the customer is liable for the transaction. And of course, in this case, the customer says, no, I didn't spend $81,000. I think it wasn't a race car. I think someone bought a race car with a credit card. Which, yeah, anyway. So EMV is widely adopted in Europe. Italy, we're from Italy, has been one of the last countries to switch to EMV, and now EMV is all over the place. You cannot get a credit card without a chip. However, a magstripe fallback is still accepted pretty much everywhere. So on our credit cards, you still you have the chip, and of course you still have the magstripe, which is there also, for going abroad to countries which do not implement chip and PIN like the United States. About the United States, you are gonna get chip and PIN eventually. I think Wells Fargo and the Chase Bank, they already can give you cards with a chip. And one of the main reasons you will get it is because very soon when you travel abroad and you want to use a credit card, you will need a chip for using the credit card. So that's why one way or another, US will move to chip and PIN. And also, if we want to get rid of the magstripe fallback, this is a problem. We need every single country in the world to eliminate it. Because if there's at least one country where I can use the data scheme from the magstripe for performing transactions, then, of course, it is a problem for all the other countries. So that's why there's really a big push for having the US move into to the chip. So there's already been some research about EMV done by the guys at Cambridge, and they basically showed that a stolen card can be successfully used without knowing the PIN. So what they found is actually an implementation flaw of EMV, because we're talking about a standard which is how many books?
6. Oh, no, 4, sorry.
It is 4. There are 4 books of, lots of 100 pages long, and no standards need to be, that big, That on its own, it means, okay, there's something wrong there.
Particularly if it's as well written as these ones are. So.
But yeah, exactly. And actually, the attack they developed was somewhere hidden, in the actual specification. It was actually anticipated, and there are ways for preventing it. But of course, no one is implementing that, because the more complex the standard is, the more crap implementations you get around. And this was one perfect case. And of course, using a stolen card without a PIN, of course, defeats the entire purpose of having chip and PIN in the first place. But of course, the industry says that there's a difficult practicality of these attacks and so on, blah 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 blah. So the state of the security of credit cards right now is that of course the big problem is that you can build skimmers that intercept communication between the card and whatever terminal. So what we did in this research, we analyzed the practicality of skimming, cloning, and harvesting the pins on credit cards with a chip used on POS, on point of sales terminals. And we intentionally don't repeat everything that has been said already about the magstripe skimming, because we know that that's can be trivially done, and it is a big problem. So these are an example of existing ATM skimmers, which they found in the wild. As you can see, we have the the credit card, the card slot is replaced or overlaid with a new reader, which can also intercept the mag stripe. And for intercepting the pin, they either overlay a pin pad or a fake pin pad which records the pins, or they put a small camera or a cell phone somewhere. They hide it maybe in the light enclosure. They record the video of the actual pin being typed, and then they correlate that pin information with the data that was skimmed on a credit card.
In some cases, we've actually seen them replace the entire bottom sill of the ATM with the pin pad in it with a complete new one. I mean, it's this size long. They've gone clonk. And it covers the existing pin pad and records all the keystrokes.
I think someone tried to, there are online 3D printing services, and someone tried to submit a 3D printer file for an entire ATM face. And then the company that does the 3D printing blogged about that and said, yeah, we rejected this. Okay, well, that's good. Anyway, maybe it was some guy from a bank that just wanted to have a mock-up for its own reasons. I mean, discrimination. So we predict that skimming the chip will become an extremely appealing target because the mag stripe will go away eventually, and it's all about the chip. And also the chip interface is inherently accessible. Do you want to start talking about this? Yeah.
So basically, the common thing with all these terminals is they have to talk to the chip. It's a physical electrical interface, and you look at a card terminal and you think, okay, it would be kind of hard to tamper with this, but it's a lot less hard than you think. So we were doing some testing, and one of the things we built was this guy here. So this is called Fly. I don't know if you can see that okay. It's pretty small, and you can see this green cable is the programming interface. But basically, when it's actually in use, everything sits inside the card terminal. This is actually a little LED, so we know it worked when we were testing. But basically, what you do is you have an insertion card. When you go up to do your transaction, it looks like you're putting the card in, and actually what you're doing is you're putting this guy in instead, with being pushed in with the card. At that point, this has a set of contacts here. They're very thin and very raised, so you can see that the entire thing is very skinny. So when a regular user comes and puts their card in, their card mates with these terminals. These terminals on the back mate with the POS machines terminals, which helpfully provide power to us. And this is a Commoner Garden microcontroller, which is sitting here recording all the data. Now, card manufacturers make two different types of cards. Can I steal this? Mm-hmm. Some of these cards are called SDA cards, static data authentication, and some are DDA cards, dynamic data authentication. Most cards that people are issued at the moment are all SDA cards. And when you type your PIN into that POS terminal, it sends it in plain text to the card. And the card obviously responds with things like your personal account number, the card number, expiry date, etc., etc. So all that data gets to pass through Fly or Shim, which is sitting there recording everything. So it gets installed in a card terminal, and a week or so later, you rock up. You use a different card. This card hasn't got any window dressing on it. It's a JCOP card. So we come up with our JCOP card. We put it in as if we're making a transaction. We buy a pack of gum. And what this does is download all the card data from Fly. So now we can come and harvest that. This was made in a day. That's why it's got a very large chip on it, because I hand-mounted it. I have a design that has some very, very small chips on it, and including a radio chip. So I could be standing outside the store doing a walk by and downloading all the skim data from the terminal.
We actually explained the difference between SDA and EDI also later with slides.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Okay. Question?
Do you need their machine to dump the contents of the card, or can you just build your own machine and have it dump the contents of the card?
Well, we were testing terminals. We said, okay, they want to know how secure the terminal is. Well, actually, you've got a problem, because the way the terminal was designed, it's very easy to insert something in there and have it harvest all the data. And this is a common problem with all these POS terminals, is you don't know if the terminal's been tampered with, and in some cases you don't know if the terminal is a real terminal at all.
So what causes it to dump the data?
When you do...
Is it the machine, or is it you build something yourself?
Sorry, to dump the data from the fly, you come along with a card.
So you have a specially programmed card that has a different instruction set. So normally when you're talking to a credit card, I mean, I can actually show you. We're kind of straying completely off the order of the slides.
Yeah.
Yes, it's fine.
But yeah, we'll get onto that when we get to the command section. But yeah, I'll show you reading a card and so on.
It could also be RF. If you want to be more sophisticated, it could be streaming somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you have many options. Actually, they try to put some compliance regulations on the actual card slot to prevent these kind of things, but they found out that it couldn't, because it needs to be accessible. Otherwise, the chip will not work. And instead, all the compliance goes around the actual tamper-proofing of the internals of the POS for protecting the master key, which is inside the POS. But that has nothing to do with the actual skimming, which, it's a problem. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So, yeah, we completely derailed from the slides, but that's okay. Now we get back on track. So, actually, now we showed a video. We showed a silly video, so that is a nice break. How many of you have seen mine and Daniela talks from 2 years ago and the year before? Raise your hand. Okay, so you will understand what this is all about. All the others, it will either feel very, very weird, but hopefully it will be fun for you. So we have this ongoing saga about the evil hacker and the failed porn star. Of course, I'm the evil hacker, and Daniela here is the failed porn star. Anyway, it's all about epic fail. And, last time he was typing something on his laptop, but then we have freaking laser beams, which allows you to detect the keystrokes that someone is typing. And the evil hacker got the data, epic fail. This is the return of investment, which is usually a girl, and we, succeed. So now we'll see how this can be accomplished with actual credit cards, if we can start the video.
I play the blonde in this one.
Come on, darling. I want to buy you a very expensive Horizon.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Hello there.
So, my woman needs some glasses.
Sure.
My God.
These are the latest ones.
Wow, beautiful.
What do you think, darling?
I really like them.
So?
Yeah, we were fine. Can I pay with plastic? Okay. That's weird. That's weird.
No worries. Ha! I'm the evil hacker, and I cloned all your credit cards and I stole all your money. No, you got nothing. You had nothing. No, you again? Yes. Yes. My cards. My cards. Yes. They're useless. No, my cards. My cards. No.
But how did you clone his credit cards? Yes. How?
I used the power of microcontrollers. Love me! Love me! No! My cards! My cards! No! I'm alone! I'm alone! You are not alone. So it works! So this is how we completely ruin our reputation every 2 years by showing these silly videos. So, having said that, so let's talk about what the contents of the chip so we can actually get to the question about replaying. Do you want to?
Are we on the APUs?
Yes. Too many speakers, I mean.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to bounce backwards and forwards because I need to see the slides and then I'll actually show you reading a chip. So basically the way it works with a smart card, you just send a command to the card and ask it to read back some data or perform an action like create a cryptogram or verify a PIN. So in this example, we're selecting an application which is called OnePay, and that is a directory of what applications are on the card. So is there like Visa, MasterCard, and so on. And then the other example is actually verifying the PIN, in this case 6666. Okay. So on a credit card, unlike say on your mobile phone SIM, actually verifying the PIN is purely optional. This is something you do if you want to verify the PIN, but you're not unlocking the card by doing it. Okay? So unlike on your mobile phone where you have to actually put in the correct PIN in order to unlock the SIM card, if it's PIN locked, on a credit card you can just do whatever you want. You can issue commands to the card to read the data, and you don't necessarily have to verify the PIN at all. Okay? What happens when you actually put the the card into a terminal, they have a little conversation and they decide between themselves what verification methods are supported and therefore how we're going to verify this client. So you'll probably find on a US issued chip and PIN card when you start to get them that the first verification method that's acceptable to both parties will be a signature, so that the machines over here can carry on accepting signatures. I've used my chip and PIN card. So I've used my
verification methods.
Yeah. So these are the verification methods. So I've used my chip and PIN card, UK chip and PIN card, in a US terminal that was based on a UK premises that was set up so it doesn't even ask me a PIN. Yeah, so normally if I use this card, it's a debit card, normally in the UK it would always ask me for a PIN, but in this US it was actually a PX store on an airbase in the UK. It just asked me for a signature. So the terminal can override what the card wants to do, and the card can ask the terminal to do what it wants to do, and when they agree, then that's what gets done. So here we have an example of reading some of the data. So some of the stuff we can read off the card without doing any PIN verification is the equivalent of track 2 equivalent data, the date, the account number, pretty much everything you need in order to clone the card. Okay? And we can do that without ever verifying the PIN. So here's an example of magstripe data, and all of these fields that we've highlighted are available from the card without verifying the PIN. So you can reconstruct a mag stripe by simply reading the chip. So even if you're operating in a country that is using chip and PIN, you can read the data from the chip, stick it on a mag stripe, or send an image of that to someone in another country where they don't use chip and PIN, and emulate a mag stripe instead. Okay.
However,
there is
there is a catch. So they realized a few years, after this was going on, that this was a problem. And the only reason why they put track 1 and track 2 on the chip in the first place, I think it's for compatibility reasons, so that they can have terminals where the chip reader just takes track 1 and track 2 and then refeeds that back to the mag stripe reader so that you can do the transaction. And so in order to prevent this cloning, what they do, they change a 3-digit number, and now it is different on the chip compared to the one on the mag stripe. And so it's only nowadays on modern cars, not all of them, depends on the country, depends on the issuer, but in Europe, all one should have this ICVV, which is a different 3-digit number which is stored on the chip. So nowadays, if you want to clone to the mag stripe, you just make 1,000 clones, and then one of them will be right. One of them is going to be right, so eventually. So it is a little more secure. However, it's not comforting to know that the security of cloning from chip to mag stripe is all down to a 3-digit number. And one of the points about this is also that skimming the chip potentially, as it's more covert, it would allow you to skim lots of cards in any given day, which means that you have plenty of data to play with and to do whatever you want. So with this 3-digit number, it is a form of protection. It's the only thing they could have done other than removing track 1 and track 2, but that still allows you to recreate everything. But it is, the point is that this data doesn't need to be in clear text being transmitted, from the card to the terminal. It's simply too much data.
And actually, incidentally, as a side effect of you guys still using mag stripe, when you move to the more advanced technologies like the RFID cards, the pay pass and wave and pay and stuff like that, in the UK and in Europe, what those systems are doing is actually behaving like a smart card. They're doing a whole dynamic or static or whichever data authentication they want to do, as if they would on a chip. But over here, what you're actually doing is just emulating a mag stripe read. So when I read one of your credit cards from your wallet by walking past you, what I'll get is an image of a mag stripe swipe. Yeah, complete with a CVV. They use a rolling CVV. So you get a new CVV each time, but as long as you use them in the right order, then you're good. Yeah. So I can walk past you 5 times and get 5 mag stripe images. As long as I use them in that order, then they will actually work on a cloned mag stripe. Yeah.
You need a lot of transmit power to get 10, 15, 20 feet. What kind of juice do you need to get reads for RFID cards at distance?
Okay, so the question is, how much power do you need to read an RFID card at distance? And I'm going to say we're straying way off topic here.
Yes.
I'll talk to you afterwards, but basically you have to get pretty close. There's issues with that.
So back to this mag stripe thing. While we were writing the slides for this, actually my credit card got cloned, which is kind of ironic. And it has been used on a website which doesn't check the actual security code. And you would think that nowadays in 2011, there are no websites that don't check the actual CVV, the number on the back of the card, but there's plenty of them. And actually now I know about 5 of them because they're all being used by my clone credit card. And the actual data that has been used for doing the fraud, you can all get it from the chip nowadays. Even if they use the ICVV, you can get the data and you can use it on, in this case, Dolce & Gabbana website. And actually, when they did the fraud, they also sent me a gift, paid with my own credit card, which was nice. Maybe they wanted to test if it worked or not. But anyway.
And again, as it happens, my son also got frauded in the same week. He went abroad to Italy, in fact, as it happened.
I'm sorry.
Used his card in a bar and got a phone call the next morning from his bank saying, are you in Bangkok? because there's someone trying to withdraw $300 worth of currency from an ATM using your PIN number. So, you know, what are the chances? Out of 4 speakers, half of us got frauded at the same time while working on chip and pin stuff.
And I actually got warned 5 days after, so I got all my money back, but the goods were delivered to the guys that did the fraud. So they got Dolce & Gabbana stuff, and they got chocolate, amazingly enough. And they also use a service which allows you to get cash. So there's lots of very dodgy companies that allow you to process credit card transactions without the CVV in order to get cash. And they accept that kind of liability because they know that out of 100 fraudulent transactions, probably only 20% of them gets reported or whatever. So it's a good business model, apparently. Who wants to talk about data authentication? Daniele?
So, So, Zach mentioned before that basically the chip and pin cards are divided into 2 main families, the SDA cards and the DDA cards. So SDA stands for static data authentication, while DDA stands for dynamic data authentication. The main difference between those kind of cards is that the static data authentication cards basically are not able to perform a proper cryptography because the hardware of the SDA card is actually different between the hardware of the DDA cards. Into the DDA cards there is an encryption coprocessor, and this results in more expensive cards because basically an SDA card for the banks it costs like $1, while the DDA card costs $2. So
No, I think 10. It's 1 order of magnitude.
okay.
Yeah, there's a huge difference, yes.
Anyway, the important thing is that the SDA cards are cheaper, and that's why they are most widely used.
Annoyingly enough, I would quite happily pay $9 not to get fucked, basically. Don't know about you guys.
So of 40, we had 40 test cards around, and only one was DDA. And I got a new card this year, which will expire in 2015, and it is still an SDA card. So the result is that since the SDA cards are not able to perform a proper encryption, basically when the PIN is verified offline, it's always exchanged in clear text between the terminal and the card. While in the DDA cards are able to exchange the PIN between the terminal and the card itself in clear text or in enciphered mode. Talking about the chip cloning. So the SDA cards can be cloned and used without the PIN, but this is true only for the offline transaction. So we have to divide the communication between the card and the terminal into a couple of different phases. One phase is the card verification, one phase is the cardholder verification, and one phase, the final phase, is the transaction phase. So in this case, we are talking about using an SDA clone into an offline transaction. That is quite unusual in Europe. I mean, as far as I know, in Italy we don't. Yeah, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't. But it's very rare. It can happen, for instance, when you buy something on an airplane or.
Yeah, on an airplane or toll roads, stuff like that.
And maybe Adam can, in UK, you mentioned that it's some shop use actually offline transactions.
The only place I've seen it, as I said, was an offshore company operating in the UK, so they can configure the terminal to behave that way.
It depends on the risk profile of the
Yes.
vendor, the risk
Yes.
profile of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole EMV was meant to be a risk management system,
Sure.
Yes.
not a security feature.
Yeah.
Well, however, it
Right,
is
so let me just repeat that for everyone. So
Sorry.
that was what he said is it depends on the risk profile. So there's a risk profile associated with you as the guy with the card, and then another one with the vendor. And so you kind of balance the risks and come up with an acceptable process for validating that value of transaction.
However, it is ironic that, I mean, EMV was also developed, one of the main reasons was enabling offline transactions, and the first implementation of it totally fails in protecting cloning against offline transactions, which is kind of ironic. And that's why they said, okay, well, then we need to put more juice in the chip and do DDA, which also fails in its own way. It doesn't really prevent cloning for offline transaction, because there's a way where you can present one valid DDA card for the actual authentication phase, and then present a different card for the actual transaction phase. And the problem is that these phases, they're not linked together. So even with DDA, offline transactions can be still fooled. And that's why they did, well, let's do CDA, combined data authentication, which no one has ever seen, with no cards for that.
Did everyone hear that at the other side? Okay, so he was asking, is it possible that two different cards from the same account, right?
They're from the same card processor. They're both Visa, they're both issued by the same processing company.
Right, so two Visa cards issued.
But different banks can be trying to pre-identify it.
Right.
Issues that are partners with each other. But
Two different banks, same issuer, same card processor, Visa, and they behave differently. One of them always does an offline transaction and one always does an online transaction. And yes, that's because the card will actually, one of your cards probably in the list of verification methods, which we'll get to, or which I talked about earlier, will say that an offline transaction is allowable and the other one will say it's not. So it's a very simple process of walking through with the terminal and the card if both types are acceptable.
And occasionally what you'll find is that if you have a debit card, the issuer will absolutely insist on an online transaction. And certainly in the UK, debit cards always have to be online, whereas credit cards, some credit card transactions can be offline. Change your bank.
So we discussed all the public data that you can get from the card, and you can.
We have another card.
Oh, sorry.
you mentioned the DDA card could be used as an offline card by turning it on with the authentication phase.
Yes.
How does that work if you have to have a valid card and an invalid card? You can't put two cards in that.
Well, you can build a device which presents which routes the two smart cards in a different way in different phases. Well, so what you need to do, you need to build hardware for that. Sorry, he asked how you can actually fool the DDA process by presenting two different cards, because obviously you cannot remove the card and then present another card, right? But what you can do, there are ways to get around this by building hardware. I agree that it's harder to accomplish, but it's still a flaw in the DDA process. It still means that the DDA validation system is broken because the two phases are completely independent. So,
and that's why
they did CDA, specifically for preventing this attack.
CDA.
So they assume that it's actually a real threat if they bother developing a new standard, or they had to pay some consultants. Right. So to go on, we discussed the public data that you can seal, that you can sometimes clone to a max drive or that you can use on an online usage. We know that by stealing a card, you can use it without a PIN, unless banks fix the Cambridge Research attack, which we only know. We're aware of only one bank fix it. So the question now, also concerning the liability shift that we introduced, is does state-of-the-art EMV usage really protect against PIN harvesting, and therefore the use of stolen card? So again, Adam introduced card holder verification. So the card publishes to the terminal the preferred methods of authentication. There's a list, and there's an order of priorities. This list is signed on all the cards. It didn't used to be like that. On the first cards that were issued, only some pieces of data were actually signed. So they don't sign the entire contents. They sign only specific records. And nowadays, the CVM list is always signed on the cards to make it tamper-proof. So if the preferred authentication method is signature and then enciphered PIN verified online, or enciphered PIN verification by the card, then the PIN is not sent by the terminal to the card. And you can only have enciphered PIN verification by the card with DDA cards. That cannot happen with SDA card. And it is believed that only when plain text PIN verification performed by the card is present and selected from the CVM list, then the PIN can be retrieved. I mean, that's the prerequisite for intercepting the PIN. So assuming a scenario where we have DDA cards and we have a secure CVM list, which doesn't allow you to use plain text PIN. So can we still harvest the PIN? Can we use all the features that EMV gives us to make a card where the PIN cannot be stolen? So there are other pieces of data on the card called the action codes, which specify the policies for accepting or rejecting transactions. There are the issuer action codes and the terminal action codes. The issuer action codes are stored on the card, and the terminal action codes are configured on the terminal. And there are three kinds: denial, online, and default. The online action codes specify which failure condition trigger online transactions. So this is an example of action codes. These action codes, translated, they say, do not deny a transaction without attempting to go online. If offline SDA fails, transmit the transaction online. So basically, the card can tell to the terminal, hey, even if you fail to validate me, well, just go online to perform the transaction. And this is the thing. In every terminal and card combination that we tested, we could manipulate the action code when that was necessary, because it's not always necessary, so that tampering with the CVM list would never result in offline rejection. And the problem is that by doing that, we can downgrade the CVM list to include plain text PIN verification performed by the card. So the fact that the actual CVM list is signed is completely irrelevant in the case that you want to harvest the PIN. And the pretty picture over there is an example of the PIN being actually intercepted when a card has been used on one of the terminals. So all the features, the signature of the CVM list by itself, the issuer action codes, they're all irrelevant in case of PIN protection. So along with the public data that we showed you, you can always intercept the PIN by doing a man-in-the-middle attack between the card and the terminal.
Yeah, and it's important to remember what we're talking about here is we don't care if this particular transaction fails. We're not talking about making it possible to do a DDA transaction with stolen details. What we're talking about is stealing the details, just harvesting the PIN. All we care about is recover the PIN, so now we can use a stolen card and we know the PIN for that account. Or we can use it in a country that doesn't use the whole chip, and we just do a magstripe and use the PIN instead. Yeah.
And in most cases, the transaction where the man-in-the-middle attack was performed will actually go through.
Went through anyway.
Anyway, very happily.
But we don't care if it fails, because that's not what we're after.
So
here's an example. This is the card being processed before the man-in-the-middle attack. So the commands on the left are called APDUs, and we've basically translated what some of them are, most of them are just repeats. So the first APDU is selecting the visa aid. It asks for some more details of the data that's on the card. It reads a bunch of files, and that includes the card verification methods and so on. Now, on the untampered card, the card verification method said I need to do an online PIN or an encrypted PIN verification. So at the bottom, the last command is generate AC, which is an application cryptogram, which is an encrypted transaction, which is then sent to the back end for verification, or to the card for verification. Then this is the exact same card being processed now with the man in the middle in place. And what you'll see is, instead of it going on to generate the AC, it first asks how many PIN tries are left, and it then verifies the PIN. So we've tampered the CVM, we've told it not to fail if the offline transaction fails, and it's gone ahead and it's generated a plain text PIN verification, so we now know the PIN, in this case 1234. That transaction may go on to fail, but as Andrea said, in most cases it actually went through, so we were able to process the transaction anyway.
So let's talk about backend detection. So what can the backend do to detect this kind of attack? So there are several pieces of information we reach the backend to tell what's going on. One of these is the terminal verification results, which actually tells if SDA, DDA, or CDA failed. And there's the CVM results, which tells you the last cardholder verification method which was being used. So it can tell you if the plain text PIN verification was being used. And it only tells you the last one. So this can actually be fooled by a man-in-the-middle attack which presents a plain text PIN verification by the card, intercepts the PIN, relays the wrong PIN back to the card, and then presents online PIN verification of another method, and that will be successful. So the only downside of this is that the user will actually be prompted for the PIN twice. But they might think that they just entered the wrong PIN. And the backend won't know by looking at the CVM results that the actual plain text PIN verification has been performed. But of course, they will know that SDA failed. But we think that on its own, that's not a good reason for just blocking the transaction or blocking the card. And anyway, when that happens, it's too late because, as Adam said, we already get the PIN. There's also the cardholder verification results. These are also other fields that allows you to know if offline PIN verification was performed or not. And this is actually the field that might prevent the Cambridge attack, where the actual PIN verification step is being completely man in the middle, and we tell the card one thing and we tell the terminal one other thing. But this field here apparently is not being parsed by the backend at all, because if it would be parsed, then the Cambridge attack would actually fail.
Sorry, there's a question?
Yes.
How do you build a terminal with the TVR results?
You don't. The TVR results are computed by the terminal.
Yeah, that's right. But you're saying that you try to pull it around so that you can downgrade your cardless CVM,
So the CVM. So you're talking about the CVM result. The cardholder verification, the CVM result only shows you the last CVM which is being performed. So if I tamper with the CVM list and I present two options, plain text PIN verification as a preferred method and then online PIN verification, I do the man in the middle, our device gets the correct PIN, and then it relays it back to the card by changing it. When the terminal reads the card, it reads the CVM list from the card in the clear text. And we can change the contents of the CVM list.
So you modify the terminal software?
No.
Yeah,
we are in the middle between
the man in the middle does that, and that's coming up in a second.
We modify the data that's being transmitted by the card to the terminal on the fly. Okay. The data is signed, but as I explained earlier, that's irrelevant because even if the signature validation fails, the terminal still honors the CVM list which is being presented, which is the core of the problem.
Yeah.
They sign some data, and even if the signature is invalid, they still trust the data, and the terminal acts upon the data which is being presented, which is,
insane.
It's kind of broken. So there's also one other theory which we didn't test. We think it might be possible for the skimmer to advertise good offline authentication records from a store Valley SDA cards, which we clone, with a convenient CVM list for the authentication phase, and then we use the real card for the transaction. And this might result in a clear TVR, clear CVM results, and clear CVR. So the backend cannot detect that the attack has been going on. And there's a technicality in how the standard works about this, because basically the two steps, the validation step and the transaction, are not tied, and it might be possible to also present cards with a different credit card number for this step. So we didn't test this, but hopefully maybe we'll test it in the future. And CDA is designed to protect against this kind of attack, but this is the thing, and it's all about the problem with backwards compatibility. Every card has to support SDA according to the specifications. So with a man-in-the-middle attack, you can always advertise to the terminal that the card is an SDA card. You can prevent all the bits which make the terminal detect the card as a DDA or as a CDA. You can hide those and have the terminal processing the card as an actually SDA card, which is the core of the problem. So in order to fix this, they actually need to break compatibility with the standard. And that's why we think the standard is actually broken regarding the protection of the PIN. So, you showed already a bit of the hardware. Again, the industry loves to say that things are impractical. They say, well, a skimmer actually might look like this. You need to build something like this. But as we've shown, not really. This is what we ended up with. And, it's quite small. And effective.
Yeah.
So this is the skimmer install.
Yeah. So here you can see the guts of the device, and as I mentioned when I was showing this earlier, this little tab doesn't really exist. So this sits perfectly inside the card aperture, and you insert it with the card. This one doesn't have the little tab on the back to lock it in place, but we have another one that does. Slot it in. You see here that handy little cutout at the front, and actually in this version, that's where that chip sits, which was quite convenient. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly show you another couple of bits and pieces. So here's the device itself, and as I mentioned, it's quite thin. This was hand soldered, and because it was hand soldered, I had to use quite a large chip because it's actually on flexible circuit board. So you can use chips that are a lot smaller. We talked about the Cambridge attack. The Cambridge attack basically turns a card into a yes card. So some time ago, before we even looked at this, we created this little device here. This is Spider, and basically you tape Spider over an existing card, and when the card is inserted into a terminal and you type in the PIN, no matter what you type, Spider here says, yeah, that was the right PIN. Sure, 5555, yep. So this basically, Spider itself will effectively allow a stolen card to be used in a chip and PIN terminal. So then we created Fly for this project. As I said, with this particular device here, you harvest the data by inserting a special card that it recognizes and dumps the data onto the card. But we also created some other interesting little devices. This actually skims the keypad, because in a lot of these terminals, there's a very decorative display across the top of the keypad. There we go. That pops off.
Yeah. So the actual outer casing here pops off very easily.
Yep.
And then you can hide.
And this guy uses IR to watch you pressing the keys. It's 3 millimeters thick, and it sits on there perfectly. You can't really tell it's in place. So there's a whole bunch of ways, but with Fly here, it's sitting inside the slot, harvesting data left, right, and center.
So and yeah, we'll get to this point that you should never ever trust the terminal. So to sum up, so we think that the EMV skimmer poses a serious threat due to the ease of installation, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to detect for the actual operator of the terminal and the actual final consumer. We still have the problem. The EMV data allows fraudulent usage on some websites. So and all this data which is being sent in clear text can really pose a problem. The PIN can always be intercepted despite the card type and the CVM issuer action codes configuration, which is a big problem if we consider the potential issues with the liability shift, which we mentioned into the introduction. And so stealing an EMV chip and PIN card that was previously skimmed enables full usage. Even on an ATM, you can go and take cash, and raises, again, serious liability considerations. So we had a vendor response about this research. EMV Co. says that the hole will not be fixed, saying that when the full payment process is taken into account, suitable countermeasures are available. MasterCard's spokesman said in an interview that the EMV system is simply too complex for an easy fix, which I think by itself, this phrase proves our entire point that the standard is simply too complex and that should be replaced. Because they're basically saying that if for any reason we found new security issues, or they will never fix it because the system is too complex.
You also have the problem you have payment terminals everywhere. If I say I'm going to do a new card, there's no easy way to flash them. So you have to replace ATMs, flash ATMs.
Well, but
yeah. So the response was that there's too many terminals out there to be able to just replace them all, which I think was part of what they actually said, wasn't it?
Well, yes, but again, if we see the Netherlands, in the Netherlands, the hole has been closed by updating every POS firmware in the country. As soon as they knew about this problem, and as soon as they were threatened that this was shown on television, they changed the firmware on every POS terminal, disabling plain text PIN verification for domestic cards only, not for foreign cards, because they knew that domestic cards, they were all DDA. Now, we don't know how the domestic part of the card is, how they checked if the card is local or not, because surely the POS terminal doesn't store every single credit card number for domestic cards. And actually, in most cards, the country code is not signed. So when we say they fix it, we don't know if they really fix it. So there might still be ways for fooling this. And worst case, you can have a man in the middle which presents an Italian card, you get the PIN, the transaction fails, and then you can present a card from the Netherlands. So this is the thing. They need to do crypto from the start to the end of the transaction, because the chip can actually do that. And this is the way to go. Instead, we have a history of doing something which is clearly insufficient. They did SDA, oh, well, that's broken. Let's do DDA, oh, well, that's broken. Let's do CDA. So what next? Clearly, this standard is overly complex. No one seems to be implemented 100% correctly. And, we're talking about credit cards. So, we think this should be changed. And again, terminals cannot be trusted. The whole concept of trusting the terminal with the PIN when the PIN is actually verified just by the card, it really doesn't work. Terminals cannot be trusted as we've shown. And yes, they can patch EMV by disabling plain text pin verification, break incompatibility with SDA cards in case they have no ways for verifying the pin online, which we recommend. And yes, the all offline thing, so we spoke with at least a couple of banks, they actually don't need it. In Italy, no one does offline transactions. They can do everything online. They can do online PIN verification. Every terminal does online PIN verification anyway because that's what we do with debit cards. So the whole thing about EMV and the all offline thing can actually be completely, skipped. And this is the thing. They were talking about implementing EMV locally here in the United States. And for cost reasons, they're thinking of getting rid of all the offline authentication stuff because they say that in the US you already have a very good online infrastructure. And the actual side effect of doing this is that this would actually fix these kind of problems. So as EMV is not implemented yet in the US, but you're going to get it, we hope that at least we can send a message that if you do everything online, the PIN security will actually not decrease as in this case. But of course, in the long run, we would love to see a more robust protocol being used, using crypto from the start to the end. Just one thing for the questions. After we release our talk, there's been reported shipped skimmer installations dated 2008 in the wild. So, and they were, professionally done,
I have to say the hardware, really cool.
Really cool. They had serial numbers on it. Which I think is really, really scary. And they were using it for intercepting the PIN when it was sent by plain text and all the information with the real CVV, not the ICVV, for making clones. One sec. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I talked about earlier, but the skimmers in the wild had handy little wireless chips, and they were transmitting all their skim data wirelessly. So you just have to be in proximity of it, and you can download all the captured data from the pause.
GSM chip?
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Right.
So some of them had GSM chips on, so they were phoning home too.
Good. So before taking questions, do you want to show the square things,
No,
or do we take? Okay. Questions? Yes.
Do you see a physical defense to keep the skimmer device from
A physical defense?
The terminals are supposed to be tamper-proof. So one of the things we were looking at was the tamper facilities, but this design makes it very difficult because you slide it where the card's supposed to go, and that slot is meant to be tampered with. You stick a card in it. So.
I think that trying to address these problems by making physical protections, it's a failure from the beginning. I think you should not trust the terminal. The only thing you can trust is maybe your card, because that's what you keep always in your pocket, and that's what you make the transactions with. So what I would love to see is a card where the PIN is being asked on the card itself, and there's a nice little display which also tells me the amount and the merchant where I'm using the card. Because we're not even mentioning relay attacks. Your relay attacks means that I replace the unit with a different unit which does a proper transaction, but instead of doing it at that shop, it does it somewhere else because I'm relaying the data somewhere else. So I also want to know how much money is being spent, and I want to verify the PIN. If the card is responsible for telling if the PIN is correct or not, I want to input the PIN on the card itself. And but I might be dreaming.
And that technology exists. I know PayPal does a card. It's as thick as a standard credit card. It has a button on it and e-ink display. You hit the button, it generates an ID for you, one time to log into your PayPal. So the technology is certainly there for you to say to the merchant, okay, how much is the transaction? Now I'll key in my PIN, and now we'll put it in your machine, and it'll transfer the data encrypted by your card that was in your wallet over to the bank.
Are smart cards powerful enough to do any meaningful crypto?
Yes.
Are smart cards powerful enough to do meaningful crypto? Yeah, if you buy the $10 one.
Exactly. If
So,
you're willing to
yeah.
pay for your card, then you can get one with
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crypto co-processors are small enough and exist on all the cards. The JCOP card I'm using can do AES, 3days, whatever.
You have two costs that you have to remember. You have the cost of the card itself and the cost of customization. Squirting in triple SD, that's way between the big private key and crypto.
Yeah. The cost of actually loading the keys up as well as the blank card. So it has to be taken into account. Sorry, there's someone back here with a...
Yeah, okay. In addition to that type of technology, we have banks that as soon as you make a transaction, they send you an SMS within seconds. Before you do that, they need to give you back the card.
Okay, so the comment was there are some protection systems where they actually send you an SMS as soon as you do a transaction, so you can tell if someone's fraudulently using your card. And there are other ones where they phone you and ask you, are you doing this transaction? And yeah, that's good, but you shouldn't need those secondary authentication methods. We're being told by the issuers that chip and PIN is secure, so secure in fact that they'll deny any fraudulent transactions, and yet you have to lay a secondary authentication over the top of it. And every time I travel, my card gets blocked because, oh, you're in a different country. It might be fraud. Or how can it be fraud? This is a secure system, right? Why are you blocking my card? I couldn't hear.
Okay, so the question was, how did the regulators allow this liability shift to happen? Well, I think your banking regulators were the same as our banking regulators, and basically they were ex-bankers. So that's problem A. But B, it was just done through a contractual arrangement. We're changing the terminals. Here are our new terms of business. Like it or lump it. So it wasn't really an option. It's like, you get this new terminal and you're going to behave in this new manner, or you don't get to take Visa.
Okay, we had a question over here.
How do you feel about cash?
How do we feel about cash? We love it. How much have you got?
So you did all these just trying to capture the pin, right? The big idea is to try to capture the pin.
Yeah, we're specifically talking about trying to harvest PIN from chip and PIN machines. Yeah.
So can you tell me what's the difference between this and on transactional card? Which if you put a pin or camera, if you
Right.
pin or pin pad overlay, there's no difference.
Well, that's the point.
It's quick and easy.
It's quicker and easier. So the device is a small thing which we insert in the machine, as opposed to having to go and manufacture something for that particular ATM and stick it there and read the PIN and so on.
And also the actual correlation, when you skim the PIN using cameras, you have to correlate the actual hand gestures with the actual data from the skimmer, which is a manual process, and it can take some time. It is sometimes you cannot get the PIN because someone is covering with the hand on the image is not clear enough. And anyway, you need a human to be involved. By doing this on the chip interface, you can do it all automatically. You can even have your data being sent over RF or over GSM. It gets parsed by a server, publish it online, wherever you want. It's a much more automated process, which really allows harvesting of the pins. While the normal skimming, it takes much more time to do it. Yeah. And the risk of doing that on an ATM where cameras can see you, opposed to the risk of just hooking this kind of skimmer in a point of sales at a shop, they're radically different.
Okay, we'll do one more question.
Sorry, well, once you have the PIN, so the only thing you can do is to do the transaction on non-EMV terminals, which means you're online.
No. When you have the PIN, in order to use the PIN, you need to steal the card.
Yeah, that's right. So you say.
And so, but that's for using it for real, not online. The PIN is relevant online. The PIN is never used in online transaction.
Yeah. So when you do this, the only thing you can use the card when you harvest the PIN.
Yes.
The only way that you use the data that you have.
Yes.
Is to do things like you steal the card or you clone the card and then do it on a non-EMV terminal.
No. So first of all, you cannot clone the card.
Because you don't have the keys.
Because you don't have the key. If you steal the card, you can use it anywhere you want, even on EMV terminals.
So you can steal the card and then take the PIN that you captured.
Yes.
And then only that you take the real card, right?
Yes.
Not the clone card.
No.
But the point is the liability shift is against you, the consumer, because the issuers are saying it's impossible for anyone to get your PIN unless you disclosed it or you were careless with it. And this demonstrates that's not correct. There's one more question, and then I'll give you a happy ending.
Do we have to stay here and watch? Can we just leave?
You liked it last time.
I didn't sign for this. You know?
Okay, so I'll try and do this really quick because I realise we're the last thing standing between you and the bar. So we were on a
Actually,
business
it's the last thing standing between us and the bar as well.
Right, that's true. Yeah. We came on a business trip to the US back in February, and when we were here, there was a lot of buzz about this new system that if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can process credit cards. Okay, so this is a device that allows hookers and small businesses to accept credit cards. And everyone becomes a merchant. Okay. And so we thought this was quite cool. So we had a look at the device, and we had a closer look at the device, and we realised basically it's a Magstripe reader that plugs into your audio jack on your iPod, on your iPad or your iPhone. Does this sound familiar to anyone? So I seem to remember doing a talk about this like 5 years ago. So we're sitting in the lounge at this airport, and we're like, I wonder if we can just fire up that software we wrote 5 years ago and feed some data into this app. So look across from the lounge, there's a Brookstone or one of those little stores. We go in there and we buy this $10 cable, which is really expensive for a cable, by the way. And we plug it in, and 15 minutes later, it's like, okay, that was easy. So we're going to demonstrate doing a transaction, and actually this is a double-edged attack because let me just get to the terminal. So this is a gift card. We couldn't actually test this in the UK, so we got home. We couldn't test it because to use Square you have to set up an account. And by the way, I see a guy in a Square T-shirt there. Do you work for Square? Yeah. Excellent. So we'll be able to ask you questions afterwards. So we couldn't set up an account because to process Square credit cards, you have to have a US bank account, and it has to be a US credit card. We can get a US credit card by going into any store and buying one of these gift cards. So this is a Visa debit card with $100 on it, and it is a credit card. You can't use it to get cash, apparently, it says in the terms and conditions.
Or gamble.
Or gamble, yeah. Because you don't know the PIN. That also sounds familiar. So, yeah, you cannot convert this to cash. So one of the side effects was, well, we can convert these to cash. Okay. So basically what we're going to do is I'm using this card as the example because it's my card. I paid the $100. I don't want to steal any money. But what I could have done is gone online, gone to some Russian gang and bought myself a bunch of skimmed cards. Because I'm a good guy.
Somewhat good guy.
Well,
you haven't seen him when he gets grumpy.
Okay, have I got, do you want to show my side of the transaction?
You are blue.
Okay, that's real data. If you can fraud my card before we're done, then this is going to fail. That's a challenge for the guy in the square t-shirt. Okay, so I wrote a little Python script called CNP, which is card not present. And basically all I do is I take my skim data and paste it into there. And when I press play, no, hang on. No, I don't have any audio.
It's not plugged in.
Yeah, no, I wanted to hear it over the
Okay.
speakers.
Oh, we can give you.
Sorry, as I was muted.
Do you want the audio?
We can give you audio.
So, I mean, you've probably seen this before. Basically, so when I press play, that's the sound of a mag stripe being converted to audio. So I'm doing what this dongle is doing, except I'm taking arbitrary data, converting it to a sound that it would make if you swiped a card. So if I now plug that in.
Oh, actually, do you want to try? Oh, it's okay. Carry on.
Okay, so if we switch to this. So I have a willing victim. Actually, it's not a victim. In this case, it's a beneficiary.
A vendor?
A vendor. I'm going to give her money. Now, in order to make this a valid transaction, I feel I ought to purchase something. And since we're in such a public place, I'm not going to ask for what I really want. So I'm going to ask for some advice. What's a good credit card processing system?
Maybe not Square.
Not Square, maybe. She did say maybe. She said maybe. Okay, I think I'll buy that for $3. Is that, yeah? Okay. So I'm going to buy that piece of advice for $3. So we've added $3 to our transaction amount. I'm now going to present my card. Or I would if I hadn't just done that. So if I hit play.
Okay. Interwebs.
Okay, but what you can see here probably is it's recognized that I've just swiped a Visa card ending 3018. Okay, so it's now going to go online to authenticate. So you've got about 10 seconds left to stop this.
Damn you, BlackHat Wi-Fi.
Oh, the conference is over 2 minutes ago, so they've switched us off. The BlackHat router's down. Okay. Yeah, they've gone home. Okay, we got 3G.
We should have 3G, so.
So we're now authorizing. There's a very defiant look over there. Woohoo! I just bought some advice.
I'd like to sign this.
Thank you. So now I have to sign to make it official, right? Sorry, art was never my strong point. And I'll get a handy receipt in the mail. So, yeah, new twist on an old hack. Thank you.